Welcome back, everybody, to the Insightful Podcast. We gain insight in order to move forward in life. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, Ian. Ian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. Doing good. How are you?
Good, man. Good. No complaints. So let's get straight into this thing. Ian, can you introduce yourself to the audience and explain what you do on social media?
Sure. My name is Ian Bryant. I run a YouTube channel where I don't know, idea called Profound Pondering. And I'm kind of a writer in and of myself, but I like expressing myself in terms of mental health, in terms of sort of more philosophical viewpoint on life and making sure like I'm taking control of it and helping others do the same.
For sure. Okay, so how did you come up with the name like Profound Pondering and like when did it all start for you?
Oh, that's very funny. Yeah, my junior year of high school. Right now, I'm a sophomore in college, or I going into my junior year of college, but I just finished my sophomore. Yeah, my junior year of high school, I stopped doing this gaming channel with a friend of mine, and I wanted to do like my own channel, and it was kind of difficult to come up with a name, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But I was watching Alan Watts videos at the time. I took heavy inspiration from that, in terms of like expressing myself in terms of deeper thought. And I was like, dang, deep thought, deep thought. And I like alliteration. So I was like, what's another word for deep thought that I could use? And I like profound ponder. And I just stuck with it and just kept it going. That's all.
So you've been posting for a while. So did you kind of expect that it would get this big, or you were just doing it like you said to express your thoughts?
Uh, I didn't expect it to get big.
No,
I think everyone has that desire that they want it to get big because they're like, okay, yeah, if I could live off this or if I can make money on the side while doing this would be a great thing. But ultimately, I was just doing it to express myself. Like most of my friends knew I was doing it, but like people around me, like in school, didn't know I was doing it or anything like that. And most people in my college didn't know I was doing stuff like that until it blew up. So yeah.
for sure. Because like I discovered your videos. I think it was like one of your viral videos. It was on my podcast account, and then I realized I'm like, damn, you had like a longer format video where you were just speaking the whole time, and it's very different from like what the trend is now with like super high edited videos and a lot of images everywhere. So like why do you think your channel is performing so well on YouTube compared to these other channels that like over edit and stuff?
Uh, I'm not sure. I kind of just stuck to. I used to try to edit my videos crazy. Like if you go back in the to old videos, I used to like put little skits in between every like clip instead of doing like a B-roll shot of some nature or something like that. And I just came to the realization that like it only matters if I like it, and I have to sort of give my vision how I want to give it. And I feel like sometimes that over editing and stuff gets in the way of like the meaning of messages, and sometimes you have to allow people to like sort of paint the picture themselves.
Yeah,
So that's why I feel like it helps people because it forces them to be like more inside rather than watching the video.
for sure. So was there like a turning point where you saw the big growth like out of nowhere? Was there something you did or it kind of just happened?
Oh, sure. It was. I think it was a change in mindset about it, but it might
Yeah.
have just been like luck at the same time. But once I stopped like caring about the views and like how other people cared about it and made sure I was like actually genuinely like in love with what I was doing, that's when it truly turned for me because then I wasn't checking the like count, I wasn't checking the view count, and then it was just blowing up like behind the scenes, and then people would come to me like, oh, your latest video just hit 1,000. I was like, oh, that's crazy. Then I dropped another video like the next 2 days, and that video hit like 30,000. So I was like, wow, this is it's crazy. And then it was like exponential from there.
For sure. Did you ever get caught up at all with the views and stuff? Like once you started to see like that a million view video and stuff, did it ever like
Mm.
kind of get to your head, or maybe you started to focus on the views, or you've always kept like level headed?
I've tried my best to keep a level head. Of course, there are those times where you're like, "Oh man, like the video I just posted it's tanking. It's not doing as good as the other videos." But I feel like, yeah, it's just important to just try not to get caught up in that and realize that it's something beyond the view count because YouTube algorithm and whatever they put out there and whatever you do, it's not necessarily a reflection of how good uh the work is.
For sure. So do you believe in like that regular like concept of luck where some stuff just works for some people while it doesn't for others, or do you kind of think you could create your own luck based off of the efforts you put into something?
I definitely think you can create your own luck. Um, First of all, like being present enough to see the opportunity
Hmm.
because I feel like what my luck was like I finally had a video that sort of like broke into the algorithm,
Yeah,
and then I saw that, so I posted another video that I feel like I knew would do great in the algorithm. And then once I did that, like that one blew up. Like they both kind of blew up in their own right, but then that blew up. And after that, you know, people started to see the quality that was already there. So I don't necessarily feel like it was a luck. It was just the opportunity that I got. I was lucky with the opportunity, but not with the video itself.
for sure. Because you were already posting for what, like 2 years prior to that, and
Yeah,
it's what people say. It's like some people may say, "Oh, that's an overnight success," or whatever the case may be. But if you never posted those, hundreds of other videos 2 years prior, you would have
right.
never had that video that did well, right?
I wouldn't have had all the information. No, not at all. So yeah.
Exactly. So where did this mindset come from? Like, were you always this like insightful and self-reflective? And what is your process of like getting these ideas? Because when I see your videos, they're very different from anything I've ever seen. And like you said, you're a sophomore in college. Like, it's very young age to be that wise. So where did this all like come from?
I have to give my kudos to my parents and whatnot for whatever they did to make it like that. But I will say, like in my earlier years, until I was like 13 years old, I like it was terrible. My
Hmm.
experience, I wouldn't say my experience was terrible, but like how I thought about myself I was not in a good spot at all. And then it got to one point where I realized, like, it just doesn't have to be like that. Instead of like, you know, becoming victim to my own anger and whatnot about the situation, I just started meditation and listening to philosophy and doing whatever I can to get on top of my mind. And here I am.
For sure. Was there people around you that kind of saw that transformation in you? Because it was probably a drastic one, no?
I wouldn't say it was. I would say it was super gradual.
Gradual.
Ironically, um, like of course I didn't know what I was doing at the time. Like I was meditating, but I wasn't like sure what I was targeting. I just was trying to get on top of my emotions, and it got to a point where I felt like I didn't have that much emotion anymore, and then it got to a point where I felt like I had too much, and it was it's just a big balancing act. But the whole time you don't really realize that you're changing, and
Yeah.
then people around you do, and I feel like the most drastic changes have happened this year, not necessarily with my expression, but in terms of how I'm received. Because like my friends and I finally have gotten to a point where we like will have conversations about that, and we've talked about it. And everyone's like sort of in awe on how I've been able to like flip it around in terms of like how I act and how I am as a person.
Hmm. And what did that process look like getting you and your friends to open up about topics like this? Because I feel that a lot of people probably struggle with that, having deep talks with their friends, actually talking about how they're feeling, what they're currently going through. What was like the process of that? Did you like initiate it or did something kind of happen?
I would, I don't want to give myself all the credit, but I definitely would say I tend to, especially nowadays, because I stopped being like I don't know, shy about my expression. Like profound pondering, as much as it is a channel, it's still me. Like it's my expression, how I express myself. So I tend to always like push towards a deeper look into things. And I
Yeah.
will sometimes switch the subject of our conversations to that. And
Yeah.
in doing that, you open the doors to other people's perspectives. And sometimes you learn a lot from that too. But that's probably how it happened.
For sure. And was there a process of like elimination of maybe you were surrounded by people that, didn't want to talk about deep things or didn't want to like learn from each other? So did you have to like cut out those friends? And what advice would you give to people that maybe have tried, having these deep talks and trying to learn some things from that friend group to like, those friends aren't the kind of people that want to accept that kind of information or accept that kind of friendship?
Yeah. I've gotten a couple of messages about that in my DM. And my typical reaction is sometimes at first it's not a right place and right time to do it. Like
Hmm.
I didn't think to have these conversations with my friends until about this year because I wasn't being intentional enough with my communication and understanding. I feel like I don't necessarily know if it's necessary, but what I did was I sort of like was into myself. I wasn't really communicating with other people about it because I was still like battling with my own perspective, battling things inside of me, and then it got to a point where I stopped battling inside and I started just looking outside. And that's when you can start to have those conversations. I feel like once you realize there's stuff beyond you and there's other perspectives to be had.
Yeah, so you think maybe the people that go through the self development arc or self improvement arc, they might, get very focused on themselves and then kind of cut off those people around them. But like once you realize that those other people need help, that's when you can kind of open up and you're already showcasing the improvement you made. So that kind of inspires them, right?
Yeah, I would say so, or at least to talk about it, because I feel like everyone, at least in my friend group, they all have like their own self improvement arcs, whether or not it's like conscious or unconscious. They just have things in their life that sort of develop them as a person and sort of cultivate them into who they are. But sometimes, those things are negative. And I feel like it's important to just be there for people when it is a negative circumstance, because sometimes negativity can change you in positive ways, but sometimes it can lead you in the wrong path. So I feel like it's just about, you being that person to, sort of facilitate it. If not, it's just gonna happen whenever it happens.
For sure. Do you think there's a benefit to being like conscious of your own self-improvement, or like you said, it's like everyone's in some form of self-improvement whether they realize it or not. But is there more benefit to being like conscious of it, like, reflecting on how you became better or what things you're working on?
I find it to be, it's sort of a mix of both, depending on like which side you come out on. Because there's definitely like a negative side of consciousness where you can sort of get so into yourself and so analytical of your actions that you start to dislike yourself.
Yeah.
And I feel like people get into that loop, and that's why they like get away from like the whole idea of like self-help, because they feel like they're stuck. But there is a way to come on top of it, and I feel like that's what I try to do, is just try to keep that positive attitude about it, because self-improvement can be a great thing, and it's about sort of not necessarily stopping yourself from having those experiences that change you, like those negative ones, but
Hmm.
sort of getting ahead of them in the sense of like you're making sure you're a sound person regardless of your negativity and regardless of the positivity in your life. Just making sure like your base, how you are, is good enough to handle any situation. And once you get to that point, when negative circumstances come along, it's going to shake you up probably a lot less than it would have before. But there's still some room for it.
For sure. I want to hear your opinion on maybe people getting too focused on self improvement. So then they start to avoid everything that's not self improvement. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, if there's a party or something, they're not going, they don't want to have that experience. Like, where do you think of that as like, is that self destructive to you, where you kind of just like focus on self improvement wholeheartedly and you cut off like all other experiences? Because I feel like because of social media, that's such a big thing now, right? Like people don't even realize that all they focus on is self improvement and no other experiences matter.
Yeah, I can see that. I definitely had a point like that where like my siblings and friends were going out to parties, and I was like, no, I don't want to go out to parties. That's not for me. That's not for me. And even to this day, like I like parties, but I really just like the social part of it. Like I like interacting with people. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would say it's not necessarily destructive as it is just not opening your eyes to the possibility of it. I've to the same extent that you go out and have fun and relax, you have to put the work in. But to the
Yeah.
same extent that you put the work in, you have to relax. So it's like you
Exactly.
can't you can't be 100% on one side of the coin. You have to acknowledge the other side as well.
Yeah. So was there any like points of time, like you were saying, like a monk mode period, and how long were you in that kind of period for, if you were in one?
Sure. It was probably during quarantine. Not gonna lie, I used to sit
Yeah.
in my basement and meditate for like 2-3 hours on end, and that's just because I had nothing better to do. Like that was it. So it was kind of fortunate in that regard. And then once you get into yourself, I feel like open your eyes and see other people, you realize like how great it can be to actually interact with people and understand them better, because it helps you understand yourself. So
Yeah.
I feel like you just have to get to that point with yourself. But definitely monk modes. I definitely had a couple of those for sure.
For sure. Yeah, I think like the start of self improvement for a lot of people, it starts with that because you come to this realization that there's like a way you can improve, and anything else besides that is like a distraction to you. But then you realize like the value in doing different experiences that aren't just like sitting at home,
Hmm.
like doing work, going to the gym, meditating, all that stuff. Was there a point in time where you went through like a self improvement part with like fitness or anything, or was it just more like your mental side the whole
Sure.
time?
Um, yeah, I definitely think there needs to be a balance for all of them, for sure.
Yeah.
You have your mental, spiritual, and physical experiences. Um, I would say with physical, I ran track. I did sports in high school, and then I always like tried to keep a regimen where I worked out like in the morning at college. Of course, you fall out of these routines, you fall back in. But I try to stay fit. I try to stay active as much as I can. Like I don't like being restricted by my own body in a sense.
Yeah,
So yeah, basically just staying on top of your body. I would say that's important as well.
for sure. So some form of like activity all the time. Like, do you notice any difference with like your mental state when you're not doing any physical activity compared to when you are?
Absolutely. I wouldn't say it's that drastic. I feel like to some extent you can compensate for it for a time. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you're really into your mental and you're like reading a lot, getting a lot of information, then it won't necessarily feel like you need to go out and do that physical aspect of it. And the same thing if you just do the physical part. You might not always feel like you need to do the mental aspect. But I feel like it gets to a point where you're just uncomfortable doing just the one thing. You know,
Yeah,
your body needs to express itself as well, as well as your mind. So it's about having
exactly.
both.
For sure. Even with myself, like the first thing I found within self improvement was like the fitness, like working out, all that stuff. But like you're saying exactly, there was a point in time where that wasn't enough anymore. It just felt like, yeah, I'm going to the gym every day or I'm doing this and I feel good physically, but like the mental side wasn't fixed yet. And that's the problem is people think that like there is one solution to
Yeah,
like the problem when there's so many other aspects of it.
there's so much. You
For
could
sure.
find a solution in anything.
Yeah. Can you kind of touch on like I guess how your mindset was before to like how it is now?
Hmm.
Like before you kind of discovered the whole philosophy and thinking differently?
Whew. It's kind of hard to try to remember how exactly it was, but it was just like feeling like the world is sort of always coming at you, not expanding. Like regardless of what space you're coming into, it always feels like whatever you do, you're sort of being watched, if not by someone, by yourself. And I feel
Mhm.
like that's the most important thing because the more observant and analytical we are of ourselves, the more we feel like everyone else critiques us. The only person that can judge you is truly you. And, I definitely felt judged. And I would say it's just a hard space to navigate from because you don't really understand who you are. And I don't think anybody does. And you're constantly referencing yourself from your inadequacies and what you lack rather than what you have. And you,
Yeah.
you just start to think you're just that lacking. You just constantly need something more, or you need to do something crazy in class to get attention or something like that, just to, fill in the spaces that you can't fill in yourself. So I feel like my headspace was just trying to find worth in myself from things that weren't me.
Yeah. Why do you think so many people feel like they're not enough?
I feel like I can't necessarily say if I want to blame society for that, but it's definitely a society driven thing. Like a lot of people feel like they're not worth much because they're not taught to give that to themselves,
Mhm.
or they're not given it, necessarily by their parents. Because I know some kids who grew up and their parents told them that they were like beautiful, or told them to tell themselves that they're beautiful every day, and they said they've never doubted it. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of power in just giving people knowledge of themselves that's actually beneficial. Because I feel like some people just get knowledge of themselves that's negative. Because once they interact with the world, they see something negative and they take that person, or they say, "Oh, this person doesn't like me, so I'm not likable." So then they don't work themselves in a situation.
I see. So you think it's something like a very big perspective thing, right?
Absolutely.
It's even the way I see it is when you grow up, the world seems so like perfect and like positive, but like once you get to a certain age, I'd say like a teenage age, you realize that it's like completely different than maybe the way you thought of it, and then you get into this kind of process of like hating the world or despising the world and blaming the world, and then you got to come out of that, and a lot of people, I guess, don't come out of that
Yeah.
perspective,
They get
like
stuck in it
hating.
and they grow up like that. They forget that, that kid in them still exists. And that's
Yeah.
where I feel like a drastic change in terms of like my overall happiness has like stemmed from. Cause like once I realized that like part of me that just thought the world was amazing, there's so much left to the world. Oh my God, there's so much left to explore. That still exists. There's so much out here that we don't know. Like there's spots and times and in people and places that we, have not seen. And I find a lot of beauty in that. And there's beauty in just like flipping your perspective of even the same stuff that you see every day, you
Hmm.
know, in the same way that, I don't know how to articulate this properly. for example, like if you have a painting in your house and when you first got it, you was like, oh my God, this painting's so cool. You know, you can walk by it today and still say, oh my God, that painting's so cool. It's just about, you know, bringing back that feeling, you know, not allowing it to be dampened by, you know, repetition.
For sure. You talk a lot about presence, right, in your day to day. What are the best practices you think to stay present?
I think I don't know how I really got to that point where I'm like trying to be present all the time. Cause before I really didn't understand what presence meant. Like I was just saying, oh yeah, I have to be present. Like I'm meditating. I was being mindful. I wasn't
Hmm.
really being present. And I feel like it's once I sort of tried to take a manual drive. And I feel like the manual use of your body is what helped me just try to get into that mode because then you start to realize like not necessarily nothing exists but you, but you're all you can control. Like that's all that is. You can only react from here. So if you're using your body to like manually walk, like each step using every muscle, whatever you can, and in your breath at the same time, you won't have time to think. You'll just have
Yeah.
time to be there. And it's also about, you know, being in silence and allowing your mind to just, you know, learn how to be silent. Like fasting from music is something I did one time for like a good 30 days. It was nice. It
You
was nice.
saw a
Like
big difference with that?
I wouldn't say big. You just realize how much is around you that you just are so oblivious of. Like all the sounds, all the people, all the conversations, all the everything. And you realize that, you know, your life is pretty insignificant, but there's significance in that. Like in realizing that everyone has their own complex life because then you realize that you have your own. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because people get tied up with, I guess, thinking about other people's lives or what's going on in the world and stuff. Do you like find yourself cutting yourself off from all those things? Like, let's say, news on the TV that doesn't affect you personally, or like certain things going on around the world. Like, are you someone that like reads into that kind of stuff, or you're more focused on yourself?
I absolutely do read into that stuff because I feel like, you know, knowledge of the world sometimes is knowledge of the self. Like the more you understand the world, the more you can understand yourself and vice versa. And with things going on in the world, like I have a sort of a deep care for like humanity overall. Like I definitely see world issues and I'm like, oh yeah, that's for sure an issue. So I definitely look into it because I would like to be knowledgeable about that stuff so I can actually have those conversations and, you know, make change where I can.
100%. I was more like talking about, like, let's say celebrity news. Like, is that something that you
Oh, like petty
completely,
stuff.
like, petty stuff? Yeah, like
Okay.
for sure, like problems in the world
Hmm.
we definitely need to understand. But like, you know how there will still be some people that bring up like, oh, did you hear this person are dating? Like,
Okay.
to me, that's very like useless. So like, I try to cut myself off from that. Like, how do you feel about that?
To some extent, yes, for sure. But you know, sometimes it's fun to get caught up in it, like with the Drake and Kendrick stuff.
Yeah,
I was definitely like listening to every song and really following the beef. But yeah, definitely with some of the celeb culture, like I don't care who's with who. I don't really pay into that. You know, I don't go out of my way to look for that kind of information.
for sure. So my next question for you is, how do you become someone that others seek advice from? Because based off the videos that you post and the kind of wisdom that you have, I would assume your friends maybe like go to you often for advice in certain situations. How do you get to that point?
Hmm. I don't think my friends they don't really go to some of them watch my videos, but directly going to me for advice, I don't know if they do that. I don't really understand how that relationship dynamic is supposed to work because you know, of course, I've done stuff like this, but to the same degree that you know I can see that my stuff is helpful, I don't necessarily think that what I do is you know super out of the ordinary. I feel like everyone has their advice, everyone has their moments. Like all my friends have little stuff they say that sometimes I use in my own videos, and I give them credit for that you know their own little quotes, their own little philosophy that I feel like can contribute to life itself. So in terms of specific advice, I'm not sure. You know, I always tell them that I'm there for them. I give advice where it's necessary, but I feel like a situation would have to get pretty drastically negative for them to come to me for like a genuine advice or a genuine look. Sometimes they might ask for my perspective on a specific something, but I
Hmm.
don't know about you know just general advice about everything.
For sure. So let's get into I guess, the content side of things. How do you come up with your ideas? Like, is there a certain type of process, something you read, or is it kind of something that's on your mind and you use the videos as like some form of journaling?
That's a great question. It used to start directly from my sort of journal. I have 3 volumes of like notebooks that I filled out. Um, and I used to just write. Like I said, I started with writing. I used to just write out these philosophical ideas, and then it got to a point where I was like, oh, let me just record them. So I would record them. I would read a script, record it, read a script, record it, and then after a year, I would say it got to a point where like I would just have to look at my notes, and then I would be able to make the whole video. And now it's at a point where, I'll just go to my notes app. If I'll just have like many ideas throughout the day. Like I'll show you, and I'll have like a bunch of ideas throughout the day, and I'll just write them down. Like these are all video topic ideas, and I just see that title and I make the whole video. Like
You
and
just
just
like speak from
mhm,
there?
absolutely.
Wow. How do you think you've become so well spoken, like with the way you articulate your thoughts? Because I know a lot of people that like want that, like at least people around me that have said to me like, "Oh, I wish I could articulate my thoughts better so people can understand what I'm trying to say." How have you got to that point? Is it just you having a bunch of conversations that are like this, or was there like any practical, I guess, training or whatever?
Mhm. I wouldn't say there's practical training to it. I would say journaling and writing helps because it allows you to sort of expand your thoughts into more words. Like I feel like my vocabulary has increased just simply because I write. So I'm like allowing myself to sort of allow my like English and my dialogue to sort of increase its intensity. And once I do that in writing and once I'm like saying it out loud, then it got to a point where I can just do it, naturally. But there's some points where I can't articulate to a good extent. Like I try not to talk too much about uh relationships. Like I can definitely talk about them. But do I feel like my articulation is something that's going to be able to help somebody? Because I feel like sometimes with certain things, it's truly a matter of my own perspective, my own viewpoint of it, and it gets
Hmm.
very difficult to navigate those situations without context.
I see. So you believe that maybe you could, I guess, like speak about relationships, but it's just the fact that you're not able to articulate it that you don't want to speak about it.
Yeah, I just don't know necessarily know if it, like I don't find it to be applicable. Of course, my videos aren't applicable to everybody, right? But
Yeah,
I feel like with relationships, it can sometimes get dangerous because sometimes people might be in a situation that's not necessarily helpful to them at all, and then maybe they take my advice the wrong way and they stay in that relationship, or they leave when it's good. I don't know. I just don't feel like being responsible for other people's sort of relationships if they were to take my advice on it.
yeah. So you're kind of saying that like a lot of relationship, not problems, but things that happen in relationships are a lot of gray area, and you don't want to be that like that one way advice like this is what you have to do in
Hmm.
this situation. What do you think of the social media? There's a bunch of influencers and stuff that speak about dating completely, and they're saying, oh, if this happens you have to break up with her, or if this happens you have to stop texting her. Like, what do you think of that?
Yeah, seeing that stuff makes me. This is the reason I don't, because like you can't say don't do that if this, because you don't understand how their relationship works. You know, it may, and I think those people in that could potentially be projecting, their own
Yes,
insecurities, their own biases of relationships. They could do it both ways too. Like they could tell you to stay in a relationship if someone does this because if you're secure, you'll let this happen, or if you're insecure, you won't let this happen. So I feel like it's a lot of he say, she say, and at the end of the day, it's about your relationship. It's not about these other perspectives. It's about your perspective of.
exactly. How much time would you say you're online consuming content? Like, is your algorithm like created to a point where it's very productive, the videos you're watching, or do you kind of try to stay off internet like entirely?
I would say it's a perfect mix. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna lie. Like my YouTube, it's probably like half. Not it's like 1/3 consciousness and like thoughts, 1/3 music, and then 1/3 like the most goofy stuff you could imagine, like the stuff that probably does not contribute to my health at all, but it's entertaining. I
for
just feel
sure.
like you have to have a balance. Like sometimes I'll watch but I've been getting into like documentaries and more informational stuff. So that's one thing. But I've also been getting into like watching certain cartoons that just don't give me more insight on life.
For sure. And I think people maybe get ahead of themselves too much, and they take life so serious that, there's so many people online that say, "Oh, you only need to be productive, like work all the time, all these things." And I guess maybe my impression of you was different cuz I kind of thought you would have that type of mindset.
Mm,
But like based off of what you're saying, it's not like that. And I think that's very refreshing, right? Because a lot of people are saying otherwise, and I think too you need a healthy balance, right? You're not going to be you can only consume so much like detailed information and
absolutely.
actually internalize it, apply it to your own life. You can't be watching stuff like that all the time,
Yeah.
you know?
You have to take time to digest the information. Like I just can't like I feel like I can sit down, I can watch a lot, I can take in a lot, but like there's always a limit to it. Like I'm not gonna sit there and read for like 2 hours straight. It's not
Yeah,
something I feel like I feel like I could, but why would I want to do that? Like I feel like my brain's gonna start to hurt and then I'm not gonna be getting any information. So you have to realize like how your own mind works and you can consume what you can, but you have to let it digest so you can consume more. You can't just pile it on top of itself. You'll lose information.
for sure. What kind of topics are you covering right now, like in certain philosophies or whatever the case may be? Like,
Mm,
how do you go about learning something new and then, putting your own insight into it and then speaking it into your videos?
hmm. Um, that's a great question. I feel like I don't know. Like my videos definitely used to be more question oriented because it was like me questioning a certain viewpoint or like something like that. Then it became more of an internal thing, questioning yourself and then talking about yourself and talking about your own expression. And now I think it's getting to a point where it's like how to actually exist. That's where I would say like it's getting to because that's where I feel like I am. Like I'm actually learning how to not only like have I not rid of the character, but renovated the character I was before and learned everything I need to do. But I'm like learning how to apply it while learning. You know,
Yeah,
building upon myself and actually doing the things I need to do and embodying the idea that I want, of myself.
for sure. So where do you see this all going, like with your social media? Like, do you have any goals? Are you the type of person that comes up with goals and tries to achieve them, or you kind of just like go with the flow, whatever the
Um,
case may be, kind of
I
accept it?
I believe in like holding on to your progressive ideal, like what you want at the not necessarily the end goal, but like what you want. Like I want to sort of be a writer, but at the end of the day, like I want to be a philosopher. I want to regard myself as such. I don't necessarily know how that titling works at all,
Yeah.
but it is what it is. And you just hold on to that and whatever, form it takes for the modern day, it just does. Like my YouTube channel, I'm like, okay, well that's like a form of expression. Like I could be on a stage somewhere doing this, but instead I'll
Yes.
live in a time where YouTube allows me to do that. I also would get on the stage to do it too. It's just like I'm doing whatever, presents itself to me that I feel like goes towards that idea and just taking the opportunities as I come. Cause I feel like if I put it to a specific focal point, like
Yeah.
if I say I just want to be a writer, then I can do that. But then after that, then what do I have left? I like sort of my goal is to not be out of reach at all, but very broad, very
Yeah.
like big.
So you don't want to limit yourself at all.
Not at all.
Yeah.
No.
And do you think that comes from being a creative person, or is it like a perspective you had where you don't want to limit yourself? Because a lot of people are limiting themselves with their capabilities and what they can achieve. Like, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, everyone has so much potential to them that they don't see. Like if I could do it, anybody can. That's how I view things, and I feel like it just came from like instead of feeling like the world is closing in, it's feeling like the world's ever expanding. And once you feel like that, then you're like, well, I did this. Well, why can't I do that? Like, there's so much more that you can do, and you never know until you try. Like, how am I going to determine I can't do something just off of what? Nothing. That's why I like drop videos like there's no reason for doubt because what's the point in doubting yourself if you haven't even tried yet?
For sure. So, what do you believe that like your purpose is at this current moment? Is it like you said, like learning? expanding your knowledge and then sharing it with the people, or is there maybe something else that you don't share on YouTube or on Instagram that you're doing that you feel is like a big purpose for you?
Hmm. Um, Purpose. See, I tried to think of like what my purpose is. Of course, there's like I do profound pondering, so I'm happy about the impact it has. That's a great thing, and it makes me want to do it even more. Like of
Hmm.
course I'm going to stay on those deadlines. Of course I'm going to stay on that schedule for myself, but also knowing that some people are going to watch it or some people might need it for that day is a great thing as well. But in terms of my purpose, I wouldn't necessarily say it's to help people in that regard. It's just to be myself, like to try to understand who I am as a person, and if that's a part of who I am as a person, then I guess that is part of my purpose. But I wouldn't say that's the whole thing.
Yeah. Do you ever feel that maybe there's times where you're straying away from like being yourself, and how do you catch yourself in those moments to like go back to who you truly are?
See, what depends if it's negative or positive, really. If it's more of a positive thing, and I find myself like growing from it, or at least expanding my understanding of anything, then I just like add it to myself. I just expand my definition of myself. Like, oh, I also do this. Like, instead of you know trying to keep myself so contained, I just allow myself to spread out to wherever sees fit.
Hmm. So, like, why do you believe nowadays so many people like lack a purpose for living, and a lot of people also see like no significance in finding what their purpose is? What do you think? Why do you think this is an issue, or even if it is an issue in your opinion?
I feel like they fail to find a purpose, or it becomes a problem because they're looking for it. And I think that's what the big thing is. Because if you're present enough, that's why I push presence. If you're present enough, you'll see it. Like you'll see what you do, you see how you act, you see how you care about stuff, you see the things that you actually want to do with your life. And if you're constantly caught up in your head about thinking about what is my purpose, what is this, what is that, you won't see it.
Hmm.
It's sitting right in front of you. So I feel like you just need to take the time to look.
That's a very good perspective, because there's like, there's videos online, or there might be some advice that people are giving out that is practical advice on how to find your purpose, like experience this and this thing. And then if you don't like it, I never thought about it like that. Like when you're not searching for it, that's usually when you find it,
Absolutely.
and that's such great advice, because I think it's so different from what everyone else is saying. So my next question is, how do you like nurture and maintain the meaningful relationships in your life?
Mm.
What is are you constantly checking up on your friends? Are you making sure to see them often? Like, what do you think the best advice is for that?
That's something I'm navigating myself because, of course, you can't be everywhere all at once, and that's something I have to sort of deal with. But you sort of let people live their own life, and I think it's important to check in on people whenever you get the opportunity or whenever you see fit. That's really going to depend person to person because the way I grew up kind of set me, I wouldn't say in a bad spot, but in a strange spot because all my friends, like, we don't need to talk to each other to be close. Like I could not see a friend for 2 years. I could see him today, and we'd be best friends still. Like I have a friend I haven't seen since eighth grade, and me and him got on the game like 2 weeks ago, and it's like nothing has changed. So I don't know. It just depends on the quality of the relationship, and I feel like sometimes, at least in my perspective, like we view attention as love in a sense when it's not.
Hmm.
Love is the act, not the specific just attention. So it depends on person to person. I definitely have those friends I check in on, and mostly like my college friends, I'll check in on because those relationships are still fresh. You don't have that trust, you don't have that established connection or whatever enough to do something like that. But I would just say it depends person to person.
Exactly, yeah. Because I even have like a friend that like moved to Portugal, and he's far away from me and stuff. But I know if I see him again, it's gonna be like we never were gone from each other, right? But then there's people in your life that you have to see on a week on week basis, or else the friendship isn't gonna last, right?
Mm,
And I guess it's just like you were saying, kind of understanding too, like which friendships those are, and like applying the right moves or whatever to make sure it works.
yeah, for sure.
100%. So, um, my next question is, what like guiding principles and philosophies do you live by? Like, for example, like besides mindfulness and presence, like what are principles you live by that like you make sure to keep in mind on a day-to-day basis so you don't like stray off your path?
Hmm. I don't know. I sometimes I just be telling myself my own quotes in my head. Um, but it used to be like, quotes from the world, quotes from other people. I would say like, uh, if it isn't in your hands, it shouldn't be in your head. That was a big one for me, a game changer. Like, what am I worried about if it's not in my control? Um, he who thinks the journey is over is the one that's truly lost. That one was another one for me because it's like, you may stray away from your path, but that doesn't mean you found the end. That just means that, you know, and I don't think there, I like to think that there is no path. Like, whatever you do is the path. There is no
Hmm.
like should have or could have. There's only things that you've done and do. Like, there's no point in thinking about that kind of stuff. Of course, be cautious. Of course, understand where you could have improved, but living in that isn't necessarily realistic in my perspective.
So you would say that maybe you don't deal with any regret of any decisions you've made. They just are the decisions you made and you move past and learn from them.
I would say I try my best to not regret. And, as you get better at it, you just, make the correct choices to not regret. But, that comes with time.
For sure. 100%. So my next question is, wait, let me see where I am here. So I guess like just to get a little more perspective on your day to day life, like how do you go about making your content? Like, are you someone that is very wake up early and get the work done, or you kind of just go with the flow? Like you're not in school now, right? Like the
Yeah.
semester's
I'm
over.
in I'm in my summer break right now.
Okay.
Um, hmm. I would say it depends. I say I'll tell you my typical schedule. What I try to do. I'll wake up in the morning whenever my body wakes me up, typically, but it's usually around like 8 or 9, if not like earlier, depending on when I went to sleep the night before. And I won't touch my phone. I'll try to get ready for my day. I'll make my bed, do whatever I need to do in that regard. Write out my affirmations, and then I'll make a video, and then I'll make a TikTok, and then I'll post a TikTok and then put it on Instagram Reels, and then I'll edit the video. Then I'll get on my phone and do whatever else I need to do. So like I start my day already like knocking out some of the most potentially stressful stuff I can do. Because once you like try to wait for that content, wait for something like that, I feel like that's when it becomes stressful. Like when you wait for the last moment, that's when it actually becomes stressful. Like if you have an essay that's due in a week and you do it the first day, you probably won't feel much stress at all. Like,
Yeah.
so I just try to limit those things in my life that could potentially cause me stress.
And do you think that maybe the reason why people make mistakes and maybe they don't reach deadlines is because they allow that stress to consume them because they maybe like procrastinated and stuff?
Yeah. They might let the stress just make them not do it. And then they're so stressed about it that they have to do it. So like either way, you're forced to be present. It's about whether or not you choose to be present like earlier or you are forced to be present later.
Yeah. So what is one thing that you would tell your younger self? Like maybe a piece of advice that was needed now that you like, you had an epiphany. You're like, "Oh, this was the thing I'm missing." Is there anything like that for you?
Uh, yeah, there's a lot of stuff I could say to my younger self. Um, but I try not to live in regards to like I could give myself like any one of my videos I would hand to my younger self. But would I do that? Probably not. Like I've learned to love and appreciate, however life shows itself to me, regardless. Like if it wasn't for those things, then I wouldn't be here right now. And it's just about appreciation of where you are, because that's pretty much all that is.
For sure. And do you think your younger self would believe like who you are today?
Oh,
Like would they expect that at all?
uh, probably not. To be honest, like I'm not 100%. Depends how young we're talking about. But if we're talking about like young, like a kid, definitely not. Like I used to be obnoxious to a degree. Like I didn't think I would ever like have a close knit friend group or a lot of people that just resonated with me that I actually could connect with. So
Yeah.
I would definitely be proud of myself and baffled, but nonetheless, like I'm here.
For sure. What about like let's say the age of 15? Like was there a big
15.
transformation from like 15 to who you are today, or like you said it was gradual, but like from that age to now was it big? Like a big transformation?
From 15 to now, Absolutely. I feel like every year is a big transformation. Like there's a lot to it. But 15 is definitely one of those years where I was like starting to branch off. Like I just started
Hmm.
doing things, not necessarily just because I thought it was for me, but because I was like, well, I might as well. And the other perspective, it doesn't really matter to me right now, or at least I ignored it. Like it mattered to me, but I ignored it. I just put it behind me, and that like those little investments that I made, like for example, I got my hair like I got starter locks, if you know what that is. Like I just tiny locks. My dreadlocks were not long,
Okay.
and that was like sophomore year, 15, high school. And then by the time I was a senior, they were like here. So I was like, they looked good, and I was getting compliments. But before, people were like, "What are you doing with your hair?" Like, but like you just make those certain investments, and you start to realize that not everyone can see your vision, and it only has to make sense to you.
Yeah. That's a big thing, bro. Like even for myself, like with the podcast, like my own social media, a lot of the times I start to doubt myself because of other people's opinions on it, right? Like people are seeing this around me that I know and they'll make comments or whatever. And sometimes it's very hard to like get out of that mindset of caring what they think.
Yeah.
Why do you think you're so good at like not caring what others think of you?
Hmm. I wouldn't say it's something I'm super good at. I've just gotten better at it. It's just like maybe subconsciously I realize that it doesn't matter. Like
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't change how my day to day actually is. Like sometimes when I'm overthinking or thinking about like how other people care about this, how other people feel about that, I'm like, at the end of the day, I don't know. Like unless they tell me what's in their head, I won't. And when they do, I can handle the situation appropriately. But me sitting here and overthought isn't going to do anything. And then I try to think about myself in like a 3D perspective, like looking at myself while I'm doing this. Why am I sitting on the edge of my bed just thinking for 15 minutes straight? If all you could do is think about it, it's probably not worth thought. I'm just wasting time at this point. You have to learn your lesson and keep moving forward. Like if you feel bad about something you did, you apologize. You don't think about how it made someone feel. You figure it out. Like if you don't do that, then there's no point in you thinking about it.
So like stop living in your head so much, right?
Yeah, I would say so. Start actually living.
Yeah, 100%. So my second last question for you is where does like all your confidence come from? Like does your confidence come from your actions on a day-to-day basis, or does it just come from you accepting who you are as a person? Cuz a lot of people, their confidence comes from the things they own, the things they do, and even for myself, like I would say in this current moment, my confidence comes from my actions on a day-to-day basis. If I don't do the things that I know I need to do, I'm like very unconfident that day, and you could see it. So where does that come for you, and like what advice would you give?
Huh. That's a good question. Of course, I have those little things. I have my daily routine. I have things I start with to make sure I don't have to think about it. So I would definitely say it's a balance. Like yes, you need to do a couple things to ensure like you feel right about where you're going. But in feeling right about who you are, I feel like you don't need to do anything. It's about being able to love yourself and validate who you are without any form of expression of it. And that's why I feel like that's what true confidence is in my head. Because then it doesn't matter like how you express it; it's how you are inside. Just as long as you have foundation in that, then whatever you do is going to be good.
For sure. So earlier I asked you, I think, about how someone like doubts themselves or whatever the case may be, like along those lines. So how do you begin to like love yourself?
Mm. I would say telling yourself, just looking at yourself in the mirror and telling yourself and trying to mean it. At least trying, because it's going to feel uncomfortable at first. It's always going to start to feel uncomfortable because it's not something you hear from yourself, but it's something you need to hear from yourself. Because
Hmm.
like if you don't love yourself, like how can you expect other people to? Like if you constantly feel like you're something that can't be loved, then you won't attract that. You won't get people that love you for you because you don't love you for you, and you won't feel free to express yourself for who you are. And then you hide those parts of yourself, and then you feel like you're hiding parts of yourself from people that say they love you. Then you feel like they don't love all of you. So like it's about really getting down to the root of it and realizing that as much as you love yourself, that's how much other people can love you.
For sure. Very well said. Okay, my last question for the pod, Ian,
For sure.
is how do you want to be remembered?
I don't want to be remembered. I want
Really?
I want my ideas to be remembered. That's kind of the point I want to get to. I mean, of course, like there's a name that's going to be attached to it, you know, a life, a legacy. But I feel like certain ideas are timeless. Like I have some quotes in my head that, you know, I have trouble remembering like who said what. Like, is it Seneca? Is it Marcus Aurelius? Is it this? Is it that? You know, you can look it up and find out. But at the end of the day, the quote is the thing that makes a difference, not the person.
Yeah, very, very well said. I always ask that to every guest on the pod because I love hearing their perspectives on it. And yours is different from everyone else's, right? Like you want your ideas to outgrow who you are,
For
which
sure.
is very well said. All right, Ian, stay after we're done recording for a bit
For
so you
sure.
can give me some constructive criticism about the pod, but I'm going to close it out here.
For sure.
Everyone, this has been the Insightful Podcast, episode 19. Thank you, Ian, for being on the pod. It means a lot.
Thanks for having me.
For sure. Everyone, like, subscribe, comment. Make sure to follow us on Spotify, and I'll see you guys on the next one.